"Get out of those seats, or I will have you dragged off this plane in handcuffs," the flight attendant screamed, her finger pointing right at my brother's face. The entire first-class cabin went silent. They looked at our hoodies, our skin color, and the older woman demanding our spots, and they made a choice. They thought they were kicking off two thugs who snuck into VIP. What they didn't know was that the phone in my hand wasn't dialing a lawyer. It was dialing the man who owned the airline. And by the time we landed, none of them would have a job. This is the story of how prejudice cost them everything. JFK International Airport was a chaotic sea of noise and movement, but for Julian and Jaxon Carter, it was usually just a blurred backdrop to their busy lives. The twins, identical in every feature save for a small scar on Jackson's left eyebrow, moved through the terminal with a quiet, synchronized confidence. To the untrained eye, they looked like two young men who might be skipping college classes, or perhaps aspiring rappers trying to look the part. They wore oversized slate-gray hoodies from a brand called Silent God, a niche Japanese streetwear label where a single hoodie cost more than most people's monthly rent. Their sweatpants were cashmere blend, and on their feet were limited edition sneakers that hadn't even been released to the public yet. But to the staff of Aerolux International, the premium airline priding itself on old-world elegance, Julian and Jaxon just looked like trouble. "I just want to sleep, Jay," Julian muttered, adjusting the noise-canceling headphones around his neck. "This merger took everything out of me. 18 hours of negotiations." Jaxon nodded, his eyes scanning the departures board. "We got the seats, Jules. 1A and 1B. The beds lie flat. Once we board, it's lights out until London." They approached the first-class check-in counter. The carpet was a deep, plush crimson, separated from the chaotic economy lines by velvet ropes and gold stanchions. Behind the marble counter stood a woman with hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection. Her name tag read Beatrice Geller, senior ticketing agent. As the twins approached, Beatrice didn't look up. She was busy typing furiously, or pretending to. "Excuse me," Jaxon said, his voice deep and polite. "Checking in for flight AL 404 to London Heathrow." Beatrice stopped typing. She looked up, her eyes narrowing instantly as they swept over the twins. She saw the hoodies. She saw the dark skin. She saw the youth. She didn't see the black card in Jackson's hand yet. "The economy line is back there, gentlemen," she said, pointing a manicured finger toward a snaking line of 300 frustrated people. "This is for first class and diamond status members only. Please read the signs." Julian sighed, rubbing his temples. "We know. We're in first class." Beatrice let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of any humor. "I doubt that. Look, boys, I don't have time for pranks or influencers trying to film TikToks in the VIP area. Move along before I call security." Jaxon didn't blink. He simply placed his passport and Julian's passport on the marble counter, sliding them forward with 2 fingers. "Check the names. Carter. Seats 1A and 1B. Beatrice huffed, snatching the passports with aggressive annoyance. "If you're wasting my time," she typed the names in, ready to smugly tell them they weren't in the system. Her fingers froze. The screen flashed green. Status: VIP, fair class. Full flex first. Special instructions: do not disturb. She stared at the screen, then back at the twins. There was no apology in her eyes, only confusion and a lingering suspicion. "Fine," she snapped. She printed the boarding passes and slapped them onto the counter, not handing them over politely as per company protocol. "Gate 4. Boarding in 20 minutes. Try to look presentable before you get on the plane. We have a dress code, technically." "Comfort is a luxury, Beatrice," Julian said smoothly as he picked up the passes. "You should try it sometime." They walked away, leaving Beatrice fuming. She snatched up her phone and dialed the gate desk. "Hey, it's Beatrice. You've got 2 urban types coming your way in 1A and 1B. I don't know how they got the tickets. Probably stolen miles or a system glitch. Keep an eye on them. If they breathe wrong, I want them off." The first-class cabin of the Aerolux Boeing 777 was a sanctuary of cream leather, walnut wood trim, and soft ambient lighting. It smelled of expensive perfume and fresh orchids. Julian and Jaxon were the first to board. They stowed their modest carry-on duffels and settled into the massive suites in the front row. Julian immediately reclined his seat, pulling his hood up over his eyes to block out the light. Jaxon pulled out a tablet to check the Asian stock markets. A flight attendant named Sarah, young and looking slightly nervous, approached them. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Carter, and—" "Mr. Carter, can I get you a pre-departure beverage? Champagne? Sparkling water?" "Water, please," Jaxon smiled. "And if we could get some extra pillows, we plan to sleep the whole way." "Of course," Sarah said. She seemed pleasant enough, unlike the woman at the check-in desk. But the peace didn't last. 10 minutes later, the heavy curtains parted, and a whirlwind of expensive floral scent and high-pitched complaining filled the cabin. "I simply do not understand why the lounge was out of the cucumber sandwiches. It is unacceptable." Enter Mrs. Agatha Bellows. She was a woman in her late 60s, draped in a leopard print coat that looked like it cost more than a car. Clutching a Birkin bag like a weapon, trailing behind her was the chief purser of the flight, a tall, severe-looking man named Richard Sterling. No relation to the twins, ironically. Richard had a face that looked like it had been carved out of cold marble. Mrs. Bellows stopped dead in the aisle. She dropped her sunglasses down her nose and stared at row 1. "Richard!" she shrieked. The twins didn't move. Julian was already half asleep. "Yes, Mrs. Bellows?" Richard stepped forward, clasping his hands behind his back. "What?" She pointed a shaking finger at Julian's hooded figure. "Is that doing in my seat?" Jaxon looked up from his tablet, removing one earbud. "Excuse me?" Mrs. Bellows ignored him, turning her fury entirely on the chief purser. "I always sit in 1A. My husband, the senator, always books 1A for me. Why are these people in the front row? It smells like a locker room in here already." Richard's eyes flicked to the twins. He saw the hoodies. He saw the sneakers. And he made the same calculation Beatrice had made earlier. Low value. Probably upgrades, maybe employee family travel. "I apologize, Mrs. Bellows," Richard said, his voice dripping with sycophancy. "There must be a mix-up. Let me handle this." Richard marched up to Jaxon's suite. He didn't smile. He didn't use the customer service voice. He used the voice of a headmaster scolding a delinquent student. "Sir," Richard said loudly, "I need to see your boarding passes. Now." Jaxon sighed, reaching into his pocket. "We already showed them at the gate." He handed them over. Richard scanned them, looking for a flaw. "These are first-class tickets," he admitted grudgingly. "However, it seems there has been a double booking error. Mrs. Bellows is a Diamond-tier legacy passenger. Seat 1A is reserved for her." "I booked these seats 3 weeks ago," Jaxon said calmly. "Full fare, no points, cash. It's not a double booking." Mrs. Bellows stomped her foot. "I don't care when you booked it. I am Agatha Bellows. My family has been flying Aerolux since before you were born. I cannot sit in row 2. The vibration from the galley bothers my migraines. I need 1A. She looked at Julian, who hadn't moved. "And wake that one up. He's ignoring me." "How rude!" Richard leaned over and tapped Julian aggressively on the shoulder. "Sir, wake up. We have a situation." Julian pulled his hood back, revealing tired, red-rimmed eyes. He looked at Richard, then at the screeching woman. "Are we landing?" "No," Richard said. "You are moving. Mrs. Bellows requires these seats. I have 2 lovely seats available in premium economy. I will authorize a partial refund voucher for you." The cabin went deadly silent. Other passengers, businessmen in suits, a famous actress in 2F, were watching. "Premium economy?" Julian repeated, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "You want us to downgrade so she can sit here?" "It is a reasonable request," Richard said, puffing out his chest. "Given the nature of the passenger list, we feel Mrs. Bellows would be more comfortable here." And you boys would be more at ease in the back, with people more your age. He meant class. He meant race. He didn't say it, but it hung in the air like smoke. And if we refuse? Jaxon asked, his voice dropping an octave. Richard sneered. Then I will have the pilot remove you as a security threat. Disrupting a flight crew is a federal offense. Do you really want to go to jail today? Or do you want to take the free meal voucher and go to row 20? Jaxon looked at Julian. They shared a silent communication that only twins possess. Do we end this now? No. Let them dig the hole deeper. We aren't moving, Julian said, leaning back and closing his eyes again. And if you touch me again, Richard, you'll be the one facing charges. Mrs. Bellows gasped. Threats! Did you hear that, Richard? He threatened me. He's a thug. I don't feel safe flying with them in the cabin. Richard's face turned red. Right, that's it. He grabbed the intercom handset on the wall. Captain, I need you in the cabin. We have non-compliant passengers refusing crew instructions and acting aggressively. A few moments later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Miller, a sturdy man with silver hair and 4 stripes on his shoulder, stepped out. He looked annoyed to be dealing with a cabin dispute. What's the problem, Richard? These two. Richard gestured dramatically to the twins. They are in Mrs. Bellows' seat. I offered them a generous compensation to move, and they became hostile. They threatened Mrs. Bellows. I want them off the flight. Captain Miller looked at the twins. Is this true? Jaxon stood up. At 6 feet 3 inches, he towered over the captain. He didn't look like a thug now. He looked like a statue of authority. Captain, we are in our assigned seats. We paid full fare. This crew member, he pointed at Richard, is trying to coerce us into a downgrade because this woman wants our spot. We haven't threatened anyone. We just want to go to London. Mrs. Bellows interjected. They are liars. Look at them. They probably stole the credit card they used to buy the tickets. Do they look like they have $20,000 for a flight? They're drug dealers, clearly. The racism was out in the open now. Captain Miller looked uncomfortable, but he knew Mrs. Bellows. She was a Kaflaya Sush, friend of the airline. He looked at the twins. He saw the hoodies. He made the safe corporate choice, or so he thought. Gentlemen, Captain Miller said sternly, the captain's word is law on an aircraft. If the chief purser says you are being disruptive, you are disruptive. I'm giving you one chance. Grab your bags, move to row 20, or get off my plane. I have a schedule to keep. You're siding with her? Julian asked softly, without checking the facts, without asking the other passengers. I don't have time for a debate, Miller snapped. Move, now. Jaxon pulled out his phone. Put that phone away, Richard barked. No recording. I'm not recording, Jaxon said calmly. I'm making a call. You said you have a schedule to keep? Well, I have a schedule too, and my schedule involves not being disrespected by the employees of a company I own stock in. You own stock? Mrs. Bellows cackled. What, 2 shares on Robinhood? Oh, that's rich. Jaxon dialed a number. He put it on speaker. The line rang twice. A voice answered. A very distinct, very famous voice. It was Harrison P. Davis, the CEO of Aerolux International. His voice was known from the safety videos and the TV commercials. This is Harrison. The voice boomed through the speakerphone. Who has this private number? Jaxon held the phone up. Harrison, it's Jaxon Carter. Julian is here too. There was a pause. The color drained from Captain Miller's face. He recognized the voice. Jaxon! The CEO's tone changed instantly from annoyed to warm and respectful. My God, I didn't know you guys were flying today. I thought you were still in Tokyo closing the robotics deal. Is everything all right? You're on one of our birds. Yeah, Harrison. We're on flight 404, Jaxon said, staring dead into Richard's eyes. But we have a problem. Your chief purser, Richard, and Captain Miller are trying to kick us off the plane. Apparently our hoodies aren't up to code, and a Mrs. Bellows wants our seats. Silence on the line. A cold, heavy silence. Put the captain on the phone. Harrison said. His voice was no longer warm. It was like ice. Captain Miller's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the smartphone. It was a sleek, unbranded prototype, probably worth more than his car, but it felt heavy, like a brick of lead. The entire cabin was watching. The business tycoon in 2A had stopped reading his Wall Street Journal. The actress in 2F had lowered her oversized sunglasses. Even Mrs. Bellows had ceased her screeching, her mouth hanging slightly open as she sensed a shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room. "Hello?" Miller said, his voice cracking slightly. "Captain Miller speaking." The voice on the other end didn't shout. It was worse. It was deadly calm, the kind of calm that precedes a tsunami. "Captain Miller," Harrison P. Davis said, his voice amplified clearly through the high-quality speaker of the phone. "I want you to listen very carefully, because your pension depends on it. The two men you are currently harassing are Jaxon and Julian Carter. Do you know who they are?" Miller swallowed hard. No, sir. They are the founders of Nexus Dynamics," Harrison interrupted. "And as of 9 o'clock this morning, when the markets opened in London, they finalized the acquisition of 40% of Aerolux International. They aren't just passengers, Miller. They are your new bosses. They own the plane you are standing on." The color didn't just drain from Richard's face. It seemed to evaporate, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under heat. He took a staggering step back, bumping into the bulkhead. Mrs. Bellows, however, was too blinded by her own entitlement to process the information. She leaned in toward the phone. "I don't care who they bought. I am Agatha Bellows. My husband is a senator. I demand these hooligans be removed." "Who is that screeching woman?" Harrison asked, his tone sharpening. Jaxon leaned forward, his voice smooth. "That's Mrs. Bellows, Harrison. She's the one who claimed we looked like drug dealers and demanded our seats because of her migraines. Richard here decided that her comfort was more important than our dignity or the company policy." "Is that so?" Harrison's voice was ice cold. "Captain Miller, put Richard on the phone." Miller handed the phone to the chief purser. Richard's hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the device. Mr. Davis." "Sir, I can explain. I was just trying to facilitate a legacy client. Did you or did you not threaten to have the owners of my company arrested because they refused to give up the seats they paid for?" "I didn't know. Did you judge them based on their attire?" Harrison pressed. "Or was it something else, Richard? Because I'm looking at the manifest right now. I see their booking. It's flagged VIP. Why did you ignore the flag?" Richard stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. I thought it was a system error. They didn't look like they belonged." Harrison finished for him. "Congratulations, Richard. You've just become the face of everything Aerolux is trying to eliminate. Hand the phone back to Jaxon." Richard handed the phone back to Jaxon like it was radioactive. He looked at the twins. For the first time, he really looked at them. He saw the intelligence in their eyes, the quality of the fabric of their hoodies, the limited edition watch on Julian's wrist that cost $250,000. He realized, with a sickening lurch of his stomach, that he hadn't just made a mistake, he had ended his career. Jaxon put the phone back to his ear. "I'm here, Harrison." "Jaxon, I am mortified," Harrison said. "This is unacceptable. I am currently in London, awaiting your arrival to sign the final papers, but I will not have you fly under the care of a crew that disrespects you. We are going to fix this. Now." "We just want to get to London, Harrison," Julian spoke up, his voice tired but firm. "We don't want a scene. But I don't trust this man to serve me food without spitting in it." "He won't get the chance," Harrison vowed. "Jaxon, hand the phone to Captain Miller one last time." Miller took the phone again. He stood at attention, a reflex from his military days. "Miller," Harrison said, "taxi the plane back to the gate." "Sir?" Miller blinked. "We are already 20 minutes late. If we go back to the gate, we lose our slot. It will be a 3-hour delay. I don't care if it takes a week, Harrison roared. Taxi the plane back. I am contacting JFK Ground Operations. I want Richard Sterling and the gate agent, Beatrice Geller, removed from duty immediately. I am activating a reserve flight crew. They are on standby in Terminal 4. They will replace your cabin crew. But, sir... Miller looked at his crew. The other flight attendants were pale, huddling in the galley. And Miller, Harrison added, you're relieved too. You failed to investigate the situation. You blindly sided with a bigot because it was the path of least resistance. Pack your bag. A reserve captain is coming with the new crew. The line went dead. Captain Miller stood there, holding the disconnected phone. The silence in the cabin was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and electric. Mrs. Bellows looked around, her eyes darting nervously. Well, are we moving him or not? I have a gala to attend in London. Miller looked at her with dead eyes. No, Mrs. Bellows, we are going back to the gate. I've just been fired. And so has he. He pointed at Richard. The sensation of a massive Boeing 777 pushing back from the tarmac is usually a feeling of excitement. But when the engine spooled down and the tug vehicle began dragging the plane back toward the terminal it had just left, the mood was funereal. Richard Sterling collapsed into a jump seat in the galley. He had his head in his hands. He was crying, ugly, heaving sobs. He wasn't crying because he was sorry. He was crying because he had lost his seniority, his pension, and his identity. He was the king of first class, and he had been dethroned by 2 boys in hoodies. Julian adjusted his seat, bringing it back to an upright position. He looked over at Mrs. Bellows. The woman was furiously texting on her phone, muttering about lawsuits and reverse racism. You know, Julian said, his voice cutting through the quiet cabin. If you had just asked nicely, if you had just said, "Excuse me, young man, my back really hurts. Would you mind swapping?" I probably would have done it. I prefer row 2 anyway. It's further from the galley noise. Mrs. Bellows snapped her head up. Don't speak to me. But you didn't ask, Julian continued, ignoring her. You demanded. You looked at my skin and assumed I was trash. You looked at my brother and assumed he was a criminal. And now, 300 people on this plane are going to be delayed because of your ego. This is not my fault, she shrieked. It's that incompetent CEO. The plane shuddered to a halt at the gate. The "fasten seatbelt" sign pinged off. But no one moved. A moment later, the main cabin door opened. Usually, the jet bridge is empty. This time, it was filled with people. 3 airport police officers, 2 men in high-end suits, Aerolux station managers, and a fresh flight crew looking bewildered but ready. The lead station manager, a stern woman named Ms. Kovan, stepped onto the plane. She held a clipboard. "Captain Miller?" she called out. Miller stepped out of the cockpit, his flight bag already over his shoulder. He looked 10 years older than he had 10 minutes ago. "Here, please surrender your badge and ID," Ms. Kovan said professionally. "You are suspended pending an internal investigation. Please vacate the aircraft." Miller handed over his credentials without a word and walked off, head down, passing the confused economy passengers who were craning their necks to see what was happening. "Richard Sterling?" Miss Kovan called out next. Richard stood up. He tried to straighten his tie, a pathetic attempt to regain dignity. "This is a misunderstanding. I have worked for Aerolux for 20 years. Badge, ID now," Ms. Kovan said. The police officers stepped onto the plane behind her. Richard saw them and wilted. He threw his badge onto the floor and stormed off, sobbing loudly. Then, Ms. Kovan turned her eyes to 1A. "Mrs. Agatha Bellows?" Mrs. Bellows puffed up like a pufferfish. "Finally!" "Someone with authority. I want to file a formal complaint against these 2. "Mrs. Bellows." Ms. Kovan interrupted, her voice sharp. "The captain has declared you a security risk due to inciting a disturbance and verbal harassment of other passengers. We are removing you from the flight." Mrs. Bellows dropped her phone. "What? You can't remove me. I'm diamond status. My husband is going to be very embarrassed when he sees the video, Jaxon said, holding up his phone. He hadn't just been calling the CEO. He had recorded the entire interaction with Richard and Mrs. Bellows before the call connected. You're going viral, Agatha. Get your hands off me, Mrs. Bellows screamed as the two police officers approached her. I will sue this airline into the ground. I will have your jobs. I will buy this plane and turn it into scrap metal. Ma'am, if you do not walk off voluntarily, we will drag you off, the officer said. And we will add resisting arrest to the disturbance charges. She looked at the officers, then at the twins. Jaxon offered her a small, polite wave. Safe travels, Agatha. With a guttural scream of rage, she grabbed her Birkin bag and stomped toward the door. As she passed the curtain into the galley, someone from the business class cabin started clapping. Then, another. Then the whole cabin erupted in applause. Good riddance, someone shouted. Take your hate somewhere else, another yelled. The twins didn't clap. They just watched. It wasn't a victory to be celebrated. It was a sad reality that had to be dealt with. Miss Kovan turned to the twins. Her demeanor softened completely. Mr. Carter! Mr. Carter! On behalf of the entire Aerolux ground team, I apologize deeply. The new crew is boarding now. We have restocked the galley with your preferred vintage of Dom Perignon, and we have credited your accounts with, well, frankly, you own the accounts, so that's redundant. She smiled nervously. Is there anything else you need before we push back again? Jaxon looked at Julian. Julian yawned, stretching his arms. Yeah, Julian said. Can you make sure Beatrice at the check-in desk is gone too? She started this whole thing. Miss Kovan nodded. Security is escorting her out of the terminal as we speak. Good, Jaxon said. Then let's go to London. The new crew was efficient, polite, and terrified. They treated the twins not just like VIPs, but like royalty. The service was flawless. The plane took off, soaring over the Atlantic, leaving the hate and the noise back on the tarmac in New York. But the story wasn't over. The flight was 8 hours long. And in the age of the Internet, 8 hours is a lifetime. Jaxon connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. He uploaded the video he had taken, the video of Mrs. Bellows screaming, Richard sneering, and the moment the truth came out. He captioned it, Prejudice flies first class too, but today it got grounded. Meet the former crew of Aerolux 404. He hit post on X, formerly Twitter and Instagram. By the time they landed in Heathrow, the world would be a very different place for Agatha Bellows. While Julian and Jaxon slept in their lie-flat beds, wrapped in Egyptian cotton duvets at 35,000 feet, the world below them was on fire. The video Jaxon had uploaded, a raw, unedited 2-minute clip, had hit the internet like a meteor strike. The algorithm, usually a fickle beast, had latched onto the footage instantly. It had everything. Entitlement, injustice, suspense, and a climax that felt like a Hollywood movie. By the time Flight AL404 began its descent into London Heathrow, the hashtag first-class racism was trending #1 globally on X, TikTok, and Instagram. Asterisk view count, 48 million. Asterisk shares, 3.2 million. Asterisk comments, 500,000 plus. Major news outlets had picked it up. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera were all running segments on the Aerolux incident. But the internet detectives had done more than just watch. They had gone to work. Within 2 hours of the post, Agatha Bellows had been identified. Not just as a wealthy socialite, but as the wife of Senator Marcus Bellows, a man running for re-election on a platform of family values and tradition. The internet also found Beatrice Geller's LinkedIn profile. They found Richard Sterling's old posts bragging about how he ran a tight ship and kept the riffraff out of first class. When the fasten seatbelt sign dinged on for landing, Jaxon woke up. He rubbed his eyes, stretched, and turned on his phone. It buzzed so violently in his hand that he almost dropped it. Notifications were cascading down the screen like a waterfall. "Jules," Jaxon whispered, nudging his brother. "Wake up! We broke the internet." Julian groaned, pulling off his sleep mask. Did we? Or did Agatha? Agatha is... Jaxon scrolled through the comments. Well, let's just say her husband isn't going to be a senator much longer. The plane touched down smoothly. As they taxied to the gate, the new flight service manager, a terrified but incredibly polite woman named Elena, knelt by their seats. Mr. Carter, she said softly. Ground control has informed us that there is quite a media presence at the arrival gate. Mr. Davis has arranged for a private car to pick you up directly from the tarmac. You won't have to go through the terminal. Harrison is here? Julian asked. He's waiting at the bottom of the stairs, sirs. The plane came to a halt. Usually the jet bridge attaches and everyone shuffles off. Not today. The main cabin door opened, but a set of mobile stairs was also rolled up to the L1 door, the door right next to the twins. After you, gentlemen, Elena said, holding the curtain back. The twins grabbed their duffels. As they stepped out into the cool, gray London morning, they saw him. Harrison P. Davis, the billionaire CEO of Aerolux, stood on the tarmac next to a sleek black Range Rover. He was flanked by two large security guards and a woman holding a tablet. Harrison didn't look like a man who had just fired his staff. He looked like a man who was ready for war. He walked up the stairs halfway to meet them, extending a hand to Jaxon, then Julian. Gentlemen, Harrison said, his voice grave. I cannot express how deeply ashamed I am of what happened in New York. I built this airline on the concept of hospitality. Today, we failed. But because of you, we can fix it. It wasn't the airline, Harrison, Jaxon said, shaking his hand firmly. It was the people, and a culture that lets people like Agatha Bellows think they own the world. Agatha Bellows, Harrison said, grimacing as they walked down to the car. I just got off the phone with her husband. He tried to threaten to pull the Senate transportation contracts from Aerolux if we didn't issue a public apology to his wife. And? Julian asked, raising an eyebrow. Harrison stopped at the car door and smiled, a shark-like grin. I told him that since the Carter brothers now own 40% of the company, he was welcome to take it up with you. And then I sent him the link to the video. He hung up. I suspect he has bigger problems right now. They got into the car. As the Range Rover sped across the tarmac, bypassing customs through a VIP diplomatic channel, Jaxon looked out the window. He saw the terminal building. Pressed against the glass of the departure lounge were hundreds of people, cameras flashing, looking for the Silent God twins. So, Harrison said, opening a folder on the leather seat between them. The papers are ready. Nexus Dynamics and Aerolux. The merger is still a go, I assume? Unless you want to buy a train company instead after today? Julian laughed. A dry, tired sound. No, we're still in. But we have some conditions for the new employee handbook. Name them, Harrison said, taking out a gold pen. Zero tolerance, Jaxon said. Not just for racism, but for classism. If a passenger in 1A treats a flight attendant like a servant, they get banned. If a gate agent judges a kid in a hoodie, they get fired. We want a complete overhaul of the VIP culture. Done, Harrison said, signing the margin of the paper. Effective immediately. But while the twins were reshaping the corporate policy of a multi-billion-dollar airline, the subjects of their video were facing a very different reality. 3 days later, the Internet does not forget, and it does not forgive. But more importantly, the Internet moves at the speed of light, while the consequences in the real world move with the crushing weight of a glacier. For Agatha Bellows, the glacier hit while she was still in London. She had never made it to the charity gala. When she arrived at the Dorchester Hotel, expecting the presidential suite she had requested, her credit card was declined. Not just declined, confiscated by the front desk clerk on instruction from the bank. She had been forced to fly home, not in first class, not even in Aerolux. Her husband's office had booked her a middle seat in economy on a budget carrier that flew into Newark instead of JFK. She had spent 7 hours sandwiched between a crying toddler and a backpacker who smelled of stale patchouli. When she finally arrived at the Bellows, sprawling estate in the Hamptons, she expected comfort. She expected her husband, Senator Marcus Bellows, to have fixed this mess. She expected him to be on the phone with the DOJ, suing the airline into oblivion. Instead, she found the front gates locked. She punched in the code. Error. She tried again. Access denied. Confused and raging, she buzzed the intercom. Open this gate. It's Mrs. Bellows. The system is broken again. The voice that answered wasn't the housekeeper. It was a man she didn't recognize. Mrs. Bellows, you've been barred from the property. Barred? This is my house, she shrieked, gripping the iron bars. Who are you? I'm with the firm of Cromwell and Sterling, representing Senator Bellows. The senator has filed for an emergency dissolution of marriage. You are being served with a restraining order and a freeze on all marital assets effective immediately. Agatha felt the blood drain from her face. He can't do that. I'm his wife. I'm the mother of his. Well, we have dogs. The dogs are with the senator. The lawyer's voice was dry, devoid of pity. Your personal effects have been packed and moved to a Motel 6 in Queens. The room is paid for 3 nights. After that, you are on your own. This is about that video, isn't it? She whispered, her hands shaking. It was just a misunderstanding. I was stressed. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mrs. Bellows. It was political suicide. The senator lost his primary backing within 6 hours of the video trending. The Family Values Coalition released a statement condemning your behavior as repugnant. You cost him his career, Mrs. Bellows. He intends to make sure you pay for it with yours. The intercom clicked off. Agatha stood alone at the gate of the life she used to own. A drizzle of rain began to fall. She pulled out her phone to call a friend, Muffy, or perhaps Clarissa from the country club. She opened the group chat. User Agatha B. has been removed from the group. She checked her messages. A text from Clarissa. Don't contact me. My husband says being seen with you is social poison. Good luck. She was 62 years old. She had no job skills. She had no access to her bank accounts. And she was standing in the rain, wearing a leopard print coat that was now the most famous symbol of bigotry in the Western world. Blank. 2 weeks later, the fall of the King Richard Sterling had always believed that first class was not just a cabin, it was a state of mind. He believed he was the gatekeeper of elegance. Now he was sitting in the plastic chair of a waiting room at a mid-tier staffing agency in New Jersey. He adjusted his tie. It was a Hermes tie, one of the few things he had kept. He looked out of place among the other applicants, who were mostly college kids looking for summer work or construction workers. Richard Sterling? A bored recruiter called out. Richard stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. He walked into the small fluorescent-lit office with the confidence he had practiced for 20 years. Good morning. I trust you've had a chance to review my CV. 20 years of premium service, chief purser for Aerolux, specialist in VIP relations. The recruiter, a young woman named Jessica, didn't look up from her computer screen. Yeah, I saw it. Impressive on paper. I am looking for a management position, Richard said, crossing his legs. Perhaps a concierge manager at a 5-star hotel or a private estate manager. Jessica finally looked up. She spun her monitor around. Mr. Sterling, when I run your name through our background check software, do you know what the first result is? On the screen was a still image from the video. It was the exact moment Richard had sneered at Jackson, his face twisted in ugly superiority. The caption read, "The face of discrimination." That is taken out of context, Richard stammered, his throat going dry. I was following protocol. It was a stressful situation. The protocol was to check their tickets, not threaten them with arrest because of their hoodies, Jessica said flatly. Mr. Sterling, we act as a filter for high-end clients. Do you think the Ritz-Carlton or the Four Seasons wants to hire the man who tried to kick the owners of Aerolux off their own plane? I need a job, Richard whispered, the arrogance evaporating. I have a mortgage. I have alimony payments. I can't place you in hospitality, Jessica said, turning the screen back. "I can't place you in customer service. Frankly, I can't place you anywhere where you have power over other people." "What do you have?" Richard begged. "Anything." Jessica sighed and clicked a few keys. "I have a graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner off the turnpike. Dishwasher and busboy, minimum wage plus tip share. But since you'll be in the back, the tips won't be much." Richard stared at her. I served caviar to diplomats. I poured vintage champagne for royalty. And now you'll be scraping gum off tables," Jessica said, handing him a slip of paper. "Take it or leave it." He took it. 3 nights later, Richard was standing in the humid, greasy kitchen of Sal's 24-hour eats. His expensive suit was replaced by a stained white apron. His hands, once manicured, were red and chapped from scalding water and steel wool. "Hey, new guy!" the line cook shouted. "Table 6 is a mess. Go bus it! And be polite. We need the tips." Richard walked out onto the floor. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and old fryer oil. He approached table 6. Sitting there were 4 young men. They were laughing, eating burgers and fries. They were black. They were wearing hoodies. One of them, a young man with dreadlocks, looked up as Richard approached with his gray bus tub. The young man's eyes widened. He pulled out his phone. "Yo," the kid whispered to his friends. "Is that?" The table went quiet. They all looked at Richard. Richard felt the heat rise up his neck, burning his ears. He wanted to run. He wanted to die. "It is him," another guy said. "The airplane guy." Richard kept his head down, frantically grabbing dirty plates. May I take these?" his voice cracked. The young man in the hoodie looked at Richard, then at his own clothes, then back at Richard. He didn't shout, he didn't make a scene. He just shook his head with a look of profound pity. "Damn, man," the kid said softly. "Life comes at you fast, huh?" Richard didn't answer. He threw the plates into the tub, the china clattering loudly, and retreated to the kitchen, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat and the grease. He had treated people like garbage because of how they looked. Now, the world looked at him and saw nothing but trash. Very blank. 1 month later, the case study. Beatrice Geller thought she had escaped. She had moved to a small town in Connecticut 40 miles away from the airport. She had cut her hair short and dyed it brown. She worked the front desk at a dental office, keeping her head down, speaking only when spoken to. She thought the world had moved on. She didn't realize that in the corporate world, moving on means creating new training materials. It was a Tuesday morning. The dentist, Dr. Evans, called a mandatory all-staff meeting. "All right, everyone," Dr. Evans said, clapping his hands. "We're doing a seminar on unconscious bias in patient care. It's a new requirement for our insurance liability. We have to watch a webinar." Beatrice sat in the back row, sipping her coffee, bored. She felt safe here. Dr. Evans dimmed the lights and started the video projector. The screen lit up with the logo of a major HR training firm. The narrator's voice filled the room. "Welcome to Module 1, The Cost of Assumption. Today we are going to look at a real-world scenario that cost a company millions of dollars and destroyed the careers of 3 individuals. We call this the Carter incident." Beatrice dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, splashing hot liquid over her shoes. On the screen, grainy footage appeared. It was CCTV footage from the airport terminal. It showed 2 young men in gray hoodies approaching a counter. It showed a blonde woman, Beatrice, barely looking up. It showed her aggressive body language. It showed her pointing to the economy line without checking their tickets. The narrator paused the video on a close-up of Beatrice's face. It was a high-definition zoom. Every ounce of her disdain and smug superiority was frozen in time, 10 feet tall on the wall of the dental office. "Look at the body language of the employee," the narrator said. "She has already decided these customers are not worth her time based solely on their appearance. She is not doing her job. She is acting on prejudice. This woman was fired immediately. She is now blacklisted from the travel industry. Don't be like Beatrice. In the dark room, Beatrice felt the eyes of her coworkers shifting toward her. "Hey," the hygienist next to her whispered. "Beatrice, isn't that—" Beatrice stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. I have to go to the bathroom." "That is you," the receptionist gasped. "Oh my God, you're the urban types lady." Dr. Evans paused the video. He turned on the lights. He looked at Beatrice, then at the frozen image on the screen. The resemblance, even with the brown hair, was undeniable. "Beatrice," Dr. Evans said slowly, "is this you?" "It was a mistake," Beatrice cried, backing toward the door. "I was tired. They looked like trouble." "They were billionaires," the hygienist snapped, "and you were a bigot." "I can't have this here," Dr. Evans said, his voice stern. "We treat a diverse community. If patients find out I have the Aerolux lady at my front desk, Beatrice, gather your things. You can't fire me for something I did at another job." "I'm firing you for lying on your application," Dr. Evans said. "You checked, no, on the box that asked if you had ever been terminated for cause or involved in a public relations scandal. Get out." Beatrice walked out to her car. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her daughter, who was away at college. "Mom, please stop calling me. People on campus found out who you are. I'm being harassed in the dorms because of you. I can't deal with this. Please just leave me alone until this blows over. If it ever does." Beatrice sat in her 2014 Honda Civic and screamed until her throat was raw. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise she had ever heard. The finale, the open sky. 6 months later, the boardroom at the top of the Shard in London was a glass sanctuary in the clouds. From here, the city looked like a toy set, moving in perfect rhythmic harmony. Julian and Jaxon Carter stood by the window. They were dressed in black Silent God crewnecks and tailored trousers. They didn't wear suits to board meetings anymore. They didn't have to. They had redefined what power looked like. The merger was complete. Aerolux was gone. The airline had been rebranded. It was now Nexus Air. The livery on the planes had changed from the stuffy gold and navy to a sleek matte charcoal and silver. The door opened, and Harrison P. Davis walked in. He looked younger, energized. The stress of the old world airline was gone. "Gentlemen," Harrison smiled, "the quarterly numbers are in. Revenue is up 40%. But more importantly, customer satisfaction is at an all-time high. The new blind booking system you implemented, where staff can't see a passenger's photo or age until they scan the passport, is a game changer." "Good," Jaxon said, turning from the window. "Systems change culture." "There is one last piece of business," Harrison said. He pressed a button on the remote, and a panel on the wall slid open to reveal a glass display case. Inside, the case was an airplane seat. It was seat 1A from the old Boeing 777. The cream leather was slightly worn. "The auction closed this morning," Harrison said. "We raised $12 million for the Underrepresented Youth in Aviation Scholarship Fund." "Who won the auction?" Julian asked. "The Smithsonian," Harrison said. "They are creating a new exhibit on civil rights in the digital age. This seat will be the centerpiece. The plaque will read, 'The seat where the world learned that dignity has no price tag.'" Jaxon walked over to the seat. He ran his hand over the leather armrest where Mrs. Bellows had once gripped her Birkin bag and screamed at him. It felt like ancient history. "We didn't just win, Jay," Julian said softly. "We cleaned house." "No," Jaxon corrected him. "We didn't clean the house. We built a new one. One where the Richards and Beatrices and Agathas don't get a key unless they learn how to knock with respect." Jackson's phone buzzed. He pulled it out. It was a notification from X. A video was trending. It was a clip of a young black girl, maybe 10 years old, boarding a Nexus Air flight. She was wearing a hoodie, The flight attendant, a new hire, smiled at her, knelt down, and said, "I love your hoodie. You look like a boss. Welcome aboard, future captain." The girl beamed. Jaxon showed the video to Julian. They both smiled. The genuine, easy smiles they hadn't been able to show at that check-in counter 6 months ago. "Ready for the press conference?" Harrison asked. "Always," Jaxon said. They walked out of the boardroom, not as victims, not as survivors, but as architects of a fairer world. They stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on the past, rising toward a future they had designed with patience, intelligence, and the absolute refusal to be invisible. The saga of Julian and Jaxon Carter proves that while prejudice may be loud, the truth is always louder. Agatha, Richard, and Beatrice learned the hard way that in the modern world your character is your currency, and theirs was bankrupt. They thought they were punching down, but they were actually digging their own graves. The twins didn't just get revenge. They got systemic change, turning a moment of disrespect into a legacy of opportunity for others. They showed us that you don't need a suit to run an empire, and you don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, one phone call can change the world. If this story of justice satisfied your soul, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We post new stories of karma and triumph every single day. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the good guys do win. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next twist.